My sister sent me a text message 3 days before her $250,000 wedding. It read, "You are out of the wedding. Only real family belongs here." I did not shed a single tear. I picked up the phone, canceled my Black Card authorization, and let the hotel know that real family could pay their own bills. They laughed at my supposed misery all night. By morning, they were begging. My name is Claire, and I am 33 years old. I am the founder of a successful financial technology company in Chicago. I have always been the invisible daughter, the boring tech nerd, while my younger sister Madison basked in our parents' approval. Madison is 28, a social media influencer whose entire luxurious lifestyle has been quietly funded by the very sister she despises. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting in my corner office overlooking the Chicago River. On my sleek glass desk sat my American Express Centurion card, the heavy black metal glinting in the afternoon sunlight. I had the event coordinator for the Waldorf Astoria on speakerphone. We were going over the final details for Madison's upcoming wedding to Jamal. Jamal is a brilliant African-American pediatric surgeon from a prominent Atlanta family. His parents are esteemed professionals in elite social circles. My parents, Thomas and Diane, wanted a spectacular show to prove our family belonged in that upper echelon. In reality, my parents were drowning in secret debt, struggling to maintain their suburban facade. I was paying for the illusion. The hotel manager was confirming the final charges. The floral arrangements, the premium open bar, the customized sculptures, and the grand ballroom rental. The remaining balance was exactly $85,000. I was literally reaching for my card to read off the security code when my personal phone buzzed with an incoming text message. I glanced at the screen, expecting a frantic request from the bride about seating charts. Instead, the message from Madison made my blood run ice cold. I read the cruel words twice to make absolutely sure I was not hallucinating. "Claire, do not bother coming this weekend. Jamal and I have been talking about the guest list, and we had to make some hard cuts. His family is elite Atlanta society, and honestly, you are just too awkward to fit in. You do not know how to dress or socialize, and you will just embarrass me in front of his relatives. This event is for real family, only people who actually understand our lifestyle. I hope you understand." I sat back in my ergonomic leather chair and let the audacity of those words wash over me. Real family only. I looked at the black card on my desk, the card that paid for her designer engagement party dress, the card that covered her luxury apartment rent after her career failed, the card about to pay $85,000 to ensure she had the fairy tale wedding she felt entitled to. I thought about our childhood. Thomas and Diane constantly praised Madison's beauty, calling my interest in coding unnatural. They drained my college savings to pay for Madison's beauty pageants, forcing me to take massive loans and work 3 jobs. I started my company from a tiny studio, pulling all-nighters while they boasted to friends about Madison's minor modeling gigs. And now, after I had built an empire from absolutely nothing, after I had silently bailed my family out of their financial ruin, my sister had the nerve to call me socially unfit. She wanted my money, but she did not want me. She wanted the prestige my wealth provided, but wanted to hide the sister who actually earned it. The hotel event coordinator cleared her throat on the speakerphone. "Ms. Claire, are you still there on the line? I just need the security code on the back of the card to process this final payment." I picked up the heavy metal card and tapped the edge against my desk. The sound was sharp and definitive in the quiet office. "Actually, there has been a slight change of plans," I said, my voice perfectly steady and devoid of any emotion. "I am withdrawing my financial sponsorship for this event. Do not process that payment." There was a stunned silence. "I am sorry," the manager stammered, panicking. "Did you say you are withdrawing sponsorship?" "That is correct," I replied smoothly. "I am canceling my authorization for the remaining $85,000. Furthermore, transfer the entire account balance, including remaining liabilities for the catering band and ballroom, directly into the bride's name." "But Ms. Claire," the manager's voice rose in pitch, The total outstanding balance across all vendors is over $240,000. If we do not receive final payment and have a valid card on file by midnight tonight, the entire wedding will be canceled. We will break down the grand staging and release all vendors immediately. I looked out the window at the city below, feeling an overwhelming sense of liberation. The invisible chains of family obligation that had choked me for my entire life suddenly snapped. I was no longer the scapegoat. I was the one holding all the power. I understand the policy perfectly, I told the manager calmly. Please forward all outstanding invoices to Madison and Thomas. They repeatedly assured me they are high society people. I am sure they have the funds readily available to cover their own event without my assistance. Ms. Claire, please, the manager pleaded, sounding desperate. If this card bounces, it will be an absolute disaster for them. The wedding is happening in exactly 3 days. They will lose everything they have planned. I smiled, though there was no joy in my heart, only cold, hard justice. As my sister just reminded me, I said softly into the receiver, I am not real family. And real family pays their own bills. I hung up the phone. I woke up the next morning at exactly 6 o'clock, well rested and completely unbothered. The sunlight was streaming through my penthouse windows, casting a warm glow. I stretched, walked into the kitchen, and started the espresso machine. It was not until I sat at my kitchen island with a steaming cup of coffee that I picked up my phone. The screen lit up like a slot machine. I had exactly 47 missed calls. 30 were from my mother Diane, 15 from my father Thomas, and 2 from Madison. I took a slow sip of my espresso and tapped the voicemail icon. The progression of their messages was a masterclass in escalating panic. The first message from Diane, left at 1 in the morning, tried to sound authoritative. Claire, the hotel just emailed Madison a massive invoice and said your card was removed. Call the bank immediately and fix this glitch. It is incredibly embarrassing. The second message, left an hour later, was less composed. Claire, answer your phone right now. The florist just tried to run Madison's card for the grand archways and it declined. They are threatening to cancel the delivery. What kind of sick game are you playing? By the fourth message, the panic had fully set in. My father Thomas was shouting, Claire, the venue coordinator, is demanding a new payment method by noon, or they are dismantling the ballroom. You are ruining your sister's life. Call me the second you get this. I deleted the voicemails one by one. The espresso tasted exceptionally good this morning. I did not feel a shred of guilt. They had spent my entire life taking my resources for granted. Now they were experiencing the harsh reality of living within their own means. I took a long shower, dressed in a sharp navy suit, and packed my overnight bag. I had a flight to catch. Ironically, I was still heading to Atlanta. Months ago, knowing I would be in town for the wedding, I scheduled a crucial dinner with my company board members and prospective investors at a private dining club. When Madison uninvited me, I simply kept my business plans and dropped the family obligations. I locked my apartment and ordered an Uber. The ride to the airport was smooth. I breezed through security and settled into the first-class lounge to review some financial reports. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a text message from Thomas. I opened it and read the frantic words, You are ruining your sister's life. Fix this payment issue right now, or you are dead to us. Do not even think about showing your face in Atlanta unless you have your credit card ready. I stared at the message. Dead to us. The threat was supposed to break me, to force me into submission like it always had when I was a teenager. Instead, it only solidified my resolve. I typed a brief response. I am already dead to you, remember? I am socially unfit. Have a beautiful wedding. I hit send, turned my phone to airplane mode, and boarded my flight. The flight to Atlanta was perfectly routine. I spent the 2 hours finalizing my presentation for the board members and enjoying a glass of sparkling water. I felt no anxiety about the impending collision. My business was thriving, my conscience was clear, and my bank accounts were secure. When the plane touched down, I turned my phone back on. A fresh wave of missed calls flooded the screen, but I ignored them. I grabbed my bag and headed straight for the rideshare pickup area. The humid Georgia air hit me as I stepped outside. I got into the back of a black car and gave the driver the destination, the Waldorf Astoria. I was not going there to attend the rehearsal dinner or to rescue my family. I was going there to conduct a transaction. When I had originally booked the venue and the vendors, I had put down a $100,000 deposit using my corporate account. Since I had officially withdrawn my sponsorship and transferred the liability to Madison, I needed to speak directly with the hotel management to sign the release forms and initiate the refund process for my initial deposit. I wanted my money back, every single cent of it. The drive gave me time to prepare. I knew my parents and sister were staying at the same hotel. I would likely run into them, but I was not afraid. I negotiate with venture capitalists for a living. Dealing with my parents' fake posturing would be effortless. The car pulled up to the Waldorf Astoria. I stepped out, smoothing my suit jacket, handed my bag to the bellhop, and walked through the revolving doors into the marble-floored lobby. The atmosphere inside the luxury hotel was usually one of hushed elegance. Today, the serene environment was completely shattered. Before I reached the reception desk, I heard the sharp sound of my mother's voice echoing across the lobby. I paused near a floral arrangement and looked toward the concierge desk. Diane and Thomas were standing in front of the main desk, their faces red with rage. The event coordinator I spoke to yesterday was standing opposite them, clutching a clipboard like a shield. "You cannot do this to us," Diane was practically screeching. "We are important guests. You cannot demand $240,000 up front." My father slammed his fist on the counter. "Run the card again. There must be a mistake. My daughter is marrying into the Thornton family. Do you know who they are?" I stood motionless, watching the scene unfold. I felt a profound sense of justice washing over me as I slowly approached the screaming pair. The coordinator took a deep breath, maintaining her professional composure. "Sir, I have run all 3 of the credit cards you provided. Every single one of them has been declined." The coordinator's voice trembled slightly under the weight of my father's glaring anger. "You have to try them again," Thomas demanded, his face turning a dangerous shade of crimson. "There is plenty of money in those accounts. The bank must have placed a fraud alert because we are traveling." I stepped closer to the reception desk, the marble floor carrying the sharp click of my heels. I cleared my throat softly. "There is no fraud alert on those cards," I said. "You are just completely out of money." Thomas and Diane whipped around simultaneously. For a split second, shock registered on their faces, quickly followed by a toxic mixture of relief and venom. They actually thought I was there to save them. "Claire, my mother!" Diane gasped, lunging forward to grab my hands. I stepped back smoothly, letting her hands grasp empty air. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, dropping the momentary facade of maternal relief. "You canceled the hotel payment. Do you have any idea how much humiliation you are causing us right now? The coordinator is threatening to tear down the floral arches. Give her your card and fix this misunderstanding before Madison finds out." "I am not here to fix anything," I replied, my voice steady and completely devoid of warmth. "I came to sign the release paperwork for my initial $100,000 deposit. The venue requires my physical signature to initiate the refund to my corporate account. I have a business dinner across town tonight, and I wanted to wrap up this administrative error beforehand." "An administrative error," Thomas shouted, stepping into my personal space. He lowered his voice, aware of the wealthy hotel guests glancing in our direction. "You call pulling the rug out from under your sister's wedding 3 days before the ceremony an administrative error. This is a targeted, unprovoked attack on your own blood. You are doing this out of pure malicious jealousy because Madison is marrying into elite society, and you are alone. You sent me a message explicitly stating I was socially unfit and uninvited from the wedding. I reminded them, making sure the event coordinator could hear every word. I simply respected the bride's wishes. If I am not real family, then my corporate credit card is not real family either." Diane's face contorted into a mask of pure entitlement. She stepped closer, her expensive but outdated perfume suffocating the air between us. You make millions of dollars every single year, Claire. You live in a penthouse. Your company was just featured in major financial magazines. $240,000 is absolute pocket change for you. How can you be so incredibly selfish to deny your sister this one special day? She needs this wedding to secure her place in the Thornton family. I let out a harsh, dry laugh. The audacity was breathtaking. Selfish, I repeated, looking my mother dead in the eye. That is a fascinating word for you to use. Is it as selfish as draining my entire college fund when I was 18 years old? You took $75,000 that I worked and saved for combined with my scholarships, and you blew it on Madison's failed acting career in Los Angeles. You paid for her headshots, her luxury apartment, and her acting coaches, while I ate ramen noodles and worked night shifts to keep myself enrolled in state college. Thomas waved his hand dismissively, as if my past trauma was a minor inconvenience. That was completely different. Madison had star potential. She needed seed money to launch her brand. You were just studying computer science. You did not need a polished image. Family supports family when they have a real opportunity. And my financial technology company was not a real opportunity, I asked, my tone dropping to a dangerous whisper. You laughed when I started my business. You called me a boring tech nerd. Yet the second my company became profitable, suddenly you both expected me to fund this suburban country club lifestyle you cannot actually afford. I paid off your car loans last year. I bought Madison her designer engagement party dress because she maxed out her own credit cards. And the moment I am no longer useful as a silent ATM, I am told I am too awkward to stand next to Jamal's wealthy relatives. Diane started to panic, looking frantically at the hotel staff who were watching the exchange with wide eyes. Keep your voice down, she hissed. If Jamal's family hears you talking like this, they will cancel the engagement. They think we are paying for everything. They think Madison is a successful influencer with generational wealth. You are going to ruin her life out of sheer spite. I am not ruining anything, I replied calmly. Madison's lies are ruining her life. I am simply removing myself from the equation. Have a wonderful weekend. I suggest you call a loan shark if you want to keep the ballroom. I turned on my heel to walk toward the management office. Suddenly, a heavy hand clamped down hard on my shoulder, jerking me backward. It was Thomas. His eyes were wide with a frantic, cornered desperation. Listen to me very carefully, you ungrateful brat! Thomas snarled, his fingers digging into my blazer. If you do not walk up to that desk right now and hand them your black card, I will completely destroy your company's reputation. I will go to the press. I will tell your investors that you are a sociopath who emotionally abuses her family. I will make sure every venture capitalist in Chicago knows you are a toxic, unstable liability. You will lose everything you have built. I looked down at the hand gripping my shoulder, then looked up into my father's eyes with absolute icy detachment. I twisted my shoulder sharply, breaking his grip with a swift, practiced motion. I smoothed the fabric of my suit jacket. Go ahead, I challenged him. Call the press. Tell them a 33-year-old woman refused to pay $250,000 for a wedding she was explicitly banned from attending. Let us see how the public reacts to parents who extort their oldest daughter. My investors care about profit margins, not your wounded suburban pride. Touch me again, and I will have you arrested for assault right here in the lobby. Thomas took a step back, his bravado instantly crumbling into fear. He knew I meant every word. He knew he had zero leverage. Diane began to hyperventilate, realizing that their carefully constructed house of cards had completely collapsed. At that exact moment, the grand glass doors of the hotel slid open. The timing could not have been more cinematic. Walking through the doors was Madison, wearing oversized designer sunglasses and holding a shopping bag from a high-end boutique. Beside her was Jamal. He looked impeccably dressed, carrying himself with the calm, observant posture of a highly trained surgeon. Madison took off her sunglasses and scanned the lobby. Her eyes locked onto our group. She saw the panicked expressions on our parents' faces. She saw the event coordinator holding the unpaid invoices, and then she saw me standing tall and completely unbothered. In a split second, Madison's survival instincts kicked in. She dropped her shopping bag onto the marble floor. She let out a loud theatrical gasp that echoed across the entire lobby. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking violently as she burst into loud, dramatic fake tears. She pointed a trembling finger directly at me, ensuring Jamal was watching her every move. Jamal dropped his own overnight leather bag and immediately wrapped his strong arms around his fiancée. Madison buried her face against his tailored dress shirt and let out a harrowing wail that commanded the attention of every single person in the hotel lobby. She clung to his lapels as if I had just physically assaulted her. Jamal glared at me over the top of her head. His posture was rigid and fiercely protective. He held her close while she continued her flawless theatrical performance. "Why is she here?" Madison cried out, her voice echoing off the vaulted marble ceiling. "Make her leave, Jamal. She came all the way from Chicago just to destroy my wedding. She cannot stand seeing me happy. She is just a bitter, jealous spinster who wants to ruin my dream day because she cannot find a man of her own." Jamal kept one arm tightly wrapped around Madison's waist. He looked at me with a mixture of anger and expectation. I knew exactly what Madison had told him about me. She had undoubtedly painted me as the unhinged, unstable older sister who deeply resented her youth and beauty. Jamal was bracing himself for a screaming match. He was waiting for me to lose my temper, to hurl insults, to act like the crazy, estranged relative they had invented for his benefit. Instead, I remained icy and completely composed. I did not raise my voice. I did not take a defensive step backward. I simply stood my ground, my hands resting lightly in the pockets of my navy suit. I looked at Jamal, meeting his protective glare with absolute unwavering calm. The stark contrast between Madison's hysterical sobbing and my stony silence was palpable in the thick air. Jamal was a highly trained pediatric surgeon. He spent his life observing subtle details in high-stress environments. I watched his eyes dart from my tailored suit to the event coordinator standing frozen behind my parents, still clutching the clipboard with the declined invoices. I saw his gaze sweep over Thomas and Diane, noting their pale, sweating faces and their terrified body language. The math was not adding up for him. If I was just a jealous, unemployed sister crashing a lobby to ruin a wedding, why did the hotel management look so incredibly stressed? Why were my parents radiating pure panic instead of righteous anger? Jamal shifted his weight, his protective stance loosening just a fraction as his analytical mind kicked into gear. Madison peeked out from Jamal's chest, her eyes searching my face for the breakdown she so desperately needed me to have. She needed me to act crazy to validate her victim narrative. I refused to give her the satisfaction. I straightened my posture, projecting the quiet authority I used to command boardrooms. "I am not sabotaging anything I said." My voice was quiet, crisp, and carried easily across the few feet separating us. "I just stopped funding your lies." The words hung in the air, heavy and lethal. I saw the immediate shift in Jamal's expression. His brow furrowed deeply. The protective anger in his eyes was instantly replaced by sharp, clinical confusion. He looked down at Madison, who had suddenly stopped crying. Her body went completely rigid against him as the blood drained from her flawless face. Funding, Jamal asked, his deep voice cutting through the tension. "What do you mean by funding?" Before I could open my mouth to explain the $240,000 of canceled credit card charges, Thomas leaped forward. My father threw himself between me and Jamal, waving his hands frantically as if he could physically sweep my words out of the air. "Do not listen to a single word she says," Thomas shouted, forcing a loud, booming laugh that sounded entirely manic. "She is completely delusional. Claire has always been a deeply troubled girl. She is estranged from the family for a reason. She makes up these wild fantasies to get attention. She has absolutely nothing to do with this wedding or our finances." Jamal stepped back slightly, creating a small boundary between himself and my father's frantic energy. He looked at Thomas, then looked back at me. I offered a slight knowing smile and simply raised one eyebrow. I did not need to defend myself. My father's desperate sweating panic was doing all the work for me. The hotel guests nearby were murmuring, fully captivated by the unfolding drama. "We have the money!" Jamal Thomas continued, his voice pitching higher as he grabbed Madison's shoulder and pulled her away from me. "The wedding is fully paid for. There was just a tiny bank error with our travel cards, but I am handling it right now. Everything is perfect. Do not let this crazy woman upset you. I promise you, my boy, the rehearsal dinner tonight will go on flawlessly. It will be the most magnificent evening of your life." Diane rushed forward to flank Jamal, her hands fluttering nervously around her designer handbag. "Yes, Jamal, please take Madison up to the penthouse suite. She needs to rest before tonight. Thomas and I will deal with hotel security and have this woman removed from the premises. Everything is under complete control." Jamal did not move immediately. He looked at Madison, whose fake tears had completely dried up, replaced by a look of sheer terror. He looked at my parents, who were practically vibrating with anxiety. Finally, he looked back at me. I gave him a polite, brief nod, acknowledging his intelligence. I knew he was not buying a single word my parents were selling. Jamal gently guided Madison toward the elevators, but his posture had fundamentally changed. The warm, protective embrace was gone. He walked beside her, his shoulders square and his expression guarded. He cast one final, highly suspicious glance over his shoulder at Thomas, his eyes narrowing as he took in the event coordinator, who was now tapping her foot and staring pointedly at my father's empty hands. Jamal stepped into the elevator, the heavy brass doors sliding shut on his deeply troubled face. The second the brass doors sealed shut, the remaining color drained completely from my mother's face. Diane grabbed Thomas by the lapels of his suit jacket, her impeccably manicured acrylic nails digging into the fabric. "What are we going to do?" she hissed, her voice dropping an octave to avoid the eager ears of the hotel staff. The coordinator stepped forward again, tapping her pen against the clipboard. "Mr. and Mrs. Anderson?" she said, her customer service tone now stripped of any real warmth. "I still need a valid payment method for the $240,000. If I do not have a working credit card on file by noon, my staff will begin dismantling the ballroom." Thomas swallowed, hard sweat beading on his forehead. "Give me exactly 3 hours," he told the coordinator, puffing out his chest in a pathetic display of false authority. "I need to make a phone call to my private wealth manager. We will handle this minor liquidity issue via wire transfer." The coordinator gave a tight nod and walked away. I watched my parents scramble toward the side exit, completely ignoring me. They were operating on pure adrenaline and sheer terror. I calmly turned and walked toward the hotel restaurant for my breakfast meeting, leaving them to face the catastrophic reality of their empty bank accounts. Behind closed doors, my parents were entirely broke. They had spent the last decade living a hollow suburban fantasy, leasing luxury cars they could barely afford and taking out multiple lines of credit just to keep up appearances at their local country club. My sudden withdrawal of funding had severed their only actual financial lifeline. They retreated to a secluded bench in the hotel parking garage, far away from the prying eyes of Jamal's wealthy relatives. Diane was hyperventilating, clutching her designer handbag to her chest. "Thomas, we have nothing," she sobbed, abandoning the polished matriarch persona. "My checking account has negative $40. The credit cards are maxed. If Madison does not marry Jamal on Saturday, we are going to lose the house. We will be laughingstocks." Thomas paced back and forth across the concrete floor, running his hands through his thinning hair. "We just need to bridge the gap," he muttered frantically. "We just need to get through the next 48 hours. Once the marriage certificate is signed, Madison is officially a Thornton. They have generational wealth, Diane. Jamal makes $500,000 a year. His father is a renowned surgeon. They will never let their new daughter-in-law's family go bankrupt. It would ruin their social standing. We just have to fake it until the ring is on her finger." Diane looked up, her eyes wide with desperation. "But how do we pay the hotel right now?" Thomas pulled out his phone, his hands shaking slightly. "I know a guy," he said, his voice dropping low. a private lender who does short-term bridge loans for high-risk clients. He does not ask questions, and he moves cash fast. The interest rates are astronomical. Thomas continued, but it does not matter. We will use the house in Chicago as collateral. We just need $150,000 in cash today to appease the venue and keep the vendors working. We can stall the rest of the payments until after the honeymoon. An hour later, Thomas and Diane were sitting in a dimly lit nondescript office building on the outskirts of the city. The contrast between the luxurious hotel lobby and this dingy gray-walled room was staggering. Sitting across from them was a man named Victor, a private lender with a greasy smile and a cheap suit. He slid a thick stack of legal documents across the scuffed laminate desk. "The terms are steep," Victor said, leaning back in his creaking chair. 20% interest compounded monthly. And if you default, my firm takes immediate possession of the property listed as collateral. No grace periods, no extensions. Diane hesitated, looking at the dense legal jargon filling the pages. "Thomas, are you absolutely sure about this? What if something goes wrong?" Thomas scoffed, snatching the pen from the desk. "Nothing is going to go wrong," he assured her, his arrogance inflating as he prepared to sign away their only remaining asset. "My daughter is marrying into one of the most prominent medical families in the South. Her fiancé is a brilliant pediatric surgeon. His family practically owns the hospital board. Once the ink is dry on their marriage license, we will be completely set for life." Thomas signed his name with a flourish on the bottom line. He passed the contract to Diane. She swallowed her anxiety fueled by the desperate need to maintain her country club facade and hastily scribbled her signature next to his. They pushed the paperwork back across the desk, smiling with the misplaced confidence of people who believed they had just outsmarted the entire system. "We are securing our family's legacy," Diane boasted, lifting her chin proudly. "A small investment now for a lifetime of absolute security. We are playing the long game." Victor inspected the signatures, his greasy smile widening into something genuinely predatory. He stamped the final page and placed the documents into a sleek manila folder. "The wire transfer for $150,000 will hit your account within the hour," Victor announced, standing up to shake Thomas's hand. "It is always a pleasure doing business with highly motivated individuals." Enjoy the wedding festivities. My parents practically sprinted out of the dingy office, feeling victorious. They had the cash. They had secured the ballroom. They believed they had successfully navigated the crisis and saved Madison's high society wedding. They were completely oblivious to the catastrophic reality of the documents they had just signed. Victor sat back down at his desk and opened the manila folder to verify the electronic filing. He flipped to the cover page of the mortgage agreement. At the very top of the contract, printed in bold, crisp black letters, was the official name of the lending institution, Apex Holdings Group. It was a subsidiary holding company that specialized in high-risk asset acquisitions. Victor typed the confirmation into his computer, sending the finalized contract straight to corporate headquarters in Chicago. What Thomas and Diane did not know, and what they had failed to read in the fine print of their desperate transaction, was the ownership structure of Apex Holdings Group. Just 3 weeks prior, that exact lending firm had been quietly and aggressively acquired during a corporate buyout. The sole proprietor, majority shareholder, and ultimate executive in charge of Apex Holdings Group was none other than Claire. My parents had just handed the legal deed of their home directly to me. Friday night arrived with the suffocating humidity typical of an Atlanta summer. The rehearsal dinner was booked at Laura, an ultra-exclusive, ridiculously expensive restaurant that required reservations months in advance and a strict dress code. It was exactly the kind of place my mother believed would cement their status in the eyes of Jamal's elite family. What my parents and Madison did not know was that I was already inside the building. I sat at the head of a long mahogany table inside the restaurant's premier private dining room. The space was completely enclosed by soundproof glass walls, offering a commanding view of the main dining floor while maintaining absolute privacy for high-stakes corporate negotiations. Tonight, I was hosting a critical expansion dinner with 3 of my top board members and 2 prospective venture capitalists. I wore a tailored emerald green suit, sipping sparkling water as we discussed the quarterly projections of my financial technology firm. I was completely in my element, focused, prepared, and entirely unbothered by the family circus unfolding outside my soundproof bubble. Out on the main floor, less than 50 feet away from my private room, Madison was sweating through her designer silk dress. The rehearsal dinner was in full swing. Thomas and Diane were holding court at a large circular table, their confidence artificially inflated by the predatory loan they had just secured. They were spending the cash recklessly, ordering the most expensive caviar and imported truffles on the menu, desperate to project the image of limitless generational wealth. Sitting across from them were Jamal and his parents, Dr. David Thornton and Mrs. Angela Thornton. The Thorntons were the epitome of established Atlanta society. Dr. Thornton was a highly respected pediatric surgeon, a man of quiet authority and immense intellect. Angela was a former university dean, elegant and graceful. They did not need to flaunt their money or laugh too loudly to prove they belonged in a place like Laura. They simply existed with a natural, unforced dignity that my family completely lacked. I watched them periodically through the glass walls as my prospective investors reviewed a portfolio. Madison was visibly struggling to keep up her carefully constructed facade. She leaned across the table, waving her hands frantically as she spun elaborate tales about her supposed success as a brand ambassador and influencer. Every time Dr. Thornton asked a polite, intelligent question about her business model or her long-term career goals, Madison stumbled. She threw out buzzwords that meant absolutely nothing, her voice pitching higher with anxiety. She reached for her wine glass with trembling fingers, desperate to numb the creeping realization that she was completely out of her depth. Diane tried to rescue her daughter by loudly interrupting the conversation to boast about the country club lifestyle back in Chicago. She bragged about the sprawling suburban estate she and Thomas owned, painting a picture of absolute financial security. I took a slow sip of my water, hiding a smirk behind the crystal glass. Diane was bragging to a renowned surgeon about a house that I now legally held the deed to. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a steak knife. Jamal sat quietly beside Madison. His demeanor had noticeably shifted since the lobby incident yesterday. He was no longer the fiercely protective fiancé shielding his partner from the world. He was observing her. He watched how she treated the waitstaff, snapping her fingers to demand more champagne. He noticed the excessive flashy way Thomas threw his credit card onto the table, loudly demanding to cover the exorbitant bill to prove his worth. Jamal's sharp clinical eyes missed nothing. The cracks in Madison's fabricated identity were beginning to splinter, and the pressure was causing her to sweat through her expensive foundation. Inside my glass fortress, my business dinner was concluding on a triumphant note. The venture capitalists were thoroughly impressed by my company's aggressive acquisition of the holding firm. We raised our glasses in a toast to future partnerships. I felt a profound sense of peace. I had built an empire with my own hands, completely free from the toxic expectations and conditional love of the people sitting out on the main floor. As the servers cleared our dessert plates, I saw movement outside the glass. Dr. Thornton was politely excusing himself from the rehearsal dinner table. He stood up, adjusting his impeccably tailored suit jacket, and offered a warm smile to his wife before walking away from the loud, chaotic energy of my parents. He navigated through the crowded restaurant, heading toward the quiet corridor that led to the restrooms. That corridor wrapped directly around the private dining room where I was seated. I continued speaking with my board members, projecting a chart onto the screen at the end of the table. I was outlining our philanthropic goals for the upcoming fiscal year, detailing the anonymous grants my firm provided to various medical research facilities. Dr. Thornton walked down the dimly lit hallway. He glanced casually to his right, his eyes sweeping over the glass-walled room. He took 2 more steps before freezing completely. He stopped dead in his tracks, his polished dress shoes halting on the plush carpet. He slowly stepped backward, pressing his face closer to the glass to get a better look at the woman standing at the head of the mahogany table. I turned my head and met his gaze through the soundproof barrier. I expected to see the polite confusion of a stranger. Instead, Dr. Thornton's eyes widened in sheer astonishment. The dignified, reserved pediatric surgeon suddenly broke into a massive, beaming smile. His entire face lit up with an expression of genuine, overwhelming delight and profound respect. He did not care about the exclusive, quiet atmosphere of the restaurant corridor. He raised his hand, waving enthusiastically, and called out my name with the joyful recognition of someone greeting a highly esteemed colleague. Dr. Thornton did not hesitate. He walked straight toward the glass walls of the private dining room, his face illuminated with absolute joy. I politely excused myself from my board members, stepping out into the hallway just as he reached the door. The moment we were face to face, Dr. Thornton enveloped me in a warm, fatherly embrace that caught me completely off guard. "Claire," he exclaimed, his voice thick with genuine emotion. "I had no idea you were in Atlanta. Why didn't you call my office? We would have rolled out the red carpet for you." I smiled, returning the embrace before stepping back. "It was a last-minute business trip, Dr. Thornton. We just closed a major acquisition and I needed to finalize some details with my investors tonight. But it is wonderful to see you. How is the new pediatric surgical wing coming along?" His eyes crinkled at the corners as his smile widened even further. "It is magnificent, Claire. Thanks to your firm's anonymous grant, we were able to purchase 3 state-of-the-art robotic surgical systems. You have no idea how many children's lives you are saving. The entire hospital board is still buzzing about the mysterious benefactor who funded the entire pediatric expansion. If they knew it was you, a brilliant 33-year-old tech founder, they would build a statue in your honor." I laughed softly, shaking my head. "You know I prefer to keep my philanthropy quiet, Dr. Thornton. I do not do it for the recognition. I do it because I have the resources to help, and your hospital does incredible work." He placed a hand over his heart, shaking his head in sheer admiration. "You are far too humble, Claire. It is an absolute honor to finally see you again. My wife Angela is going to be thrilled. You have to come meet her. She is right out there on the main floor." Before I could politely decline, Dr. Thornton had already gently taken my elbow, guiding me out of the quiet corridor and straight onto the bustling main floor of the restaurant. 50 feet away, total panic was erupting at the rehearsal dinner table. Madison had been nursing her 3rd glass of champagne when she glanced toward the hallway and spotted me. The crystal flute froze halfway to her lips. She watched in absolute wide-eyed horror as the esteemed, untouchable Dr. David Thornton, the patriarch of the family she was desperately trying to marry into, embraced me like a long-lost daughter. Madison's meticulously contoured face drained of all color. She slammed the champagne glass down onto the table, spilling the expensive liquid across the white linen tablecloth. "Mom," she hissed, grabbing Diane's arm with bruising force. Look at the hallway." Diane turned her head, her annoyance at the spilled champagne instantly evaporating into sheer terror. She saw Dr. Thornton holding my elbow, chatting amicably with me as he guided me toward their table. Diane scrambled out of her chair, nearly knocking it over. She smoothed down her dress with trembling hands, her mind racing to formulate a plan to intercept us before the 2 distinct worlds collided. Diane practically sprinted across the dining room floor, her forced high-pitched laughter echoing awkwardly ahead of her. "Oh, Dr. Thornton," she called out, waving her hands frantically as if trying to herd stray cattle. "I see you found the restrooms all right. The food is getting cold. We really should get back to the table. And oh my, look who it is. Claire. What a bizarre coincidence that you are here at the exact same restaurant." Diane stepped squarely between me and Dr. Thornton, attempting to physically block his path. She glared at me, her eyes pleading and threatening all at once. I think Claire was just leaving. Diane added, her voice tight with strain. Weren't you, Claire? You wouldn't want to interrupt such a private family evening. Dr. Thornton looked at Diane with polite confusion, clearly taken aback by her aggressive, erratic behavior. Leave? He asked, his brow furrowing. Nonsense. Diane, you did not tell me you knew Claire. Diane swallowed hard, the muscles in her neck visibly tight. She is my daughter. But as I mentioned before, we are somewhat estranged. She struggles with certain issues, and we prefer to keep our distance for everyone's sake. Dr. Thornton stopped dead in his tracks. He looked from Diane to me, his expression morphing from confusion to absolute stunned disbelief. Your daughter? He repeated, his voice dropping an octave. Claire is your daughter. Yes, but, as I said, we really should head back. Diane stammered, attempting to grab Dr. Thornton's arm and steer him away. He gently but firmly removed his arm from her grasp. He stood up straighter, the full weight of his authority as a respected surgeon radiating from his posture. Diane, I do not think you understand who you are speaking about, he said, his tone turning remarkably icy. Without waiting for her to respond, Dr. Thornton bypassed Diane completely. He kept a firm, respectful hand on my elbow and guided me directly to the center of the rehearsal dinner table. The conversation around the large circular table instantly died. Thomas froze with a piece of lobster halfway to his mouth. Jamal looked up, his sharp eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. Madison looked like she was about to faint, her hands gripping the edge of the table so tightly her knuckles were white. Angela. Dr. Thornton announced, his voice carrying clearly across the silent table. I want to introduce you to someone very special. This is Claire. Claire. The brilliant founder of the financial technology firm I have been telling you about. The anonymous benefactor who fully funded the new pediatric surgical wing at the hospital. Mrs. Thornton gasped, her elegant face lighting up with genuine delight. She immediately stood up, extending both hands toward me. Oh my goodness, Claire. It is an absolute privilege to finally meet you. David has spoken of nothing else for months. Your generosity is simply staggering. We cannot thank you enough for what you have done for those children. I took her hands, offering a warm, genuine smile. The pleasure is mine, Mrs. Thornton. Your husband is an exceptional surgeon. The funding was an easy decision. The silence at the table was absolute. The contrast between my calm professional demeanor and the frantic, sweating panic of my family was stark and undeniable. Dr. Thornton turned his attention to his son and his soon-to-be daughter-in-law. He looked at them with a mixture of profound pride and deep confusion. Jamal Madison, he said, his voice echoing in the quiet space. You didn't tell me your sister was the Claire. Dr. Thornton paused, his brow furrowing as he recalled the conversations leading up to this wedding. He looked directly at Madison, his sharp, intelligent eyes piercing right through her carefully constructed facade. Madison told us you were an unemployed dropout struggling with severe addiction. The entire table went dead silent. The entire table went dead silent. The heavy weight of Dr. Thornton's revelation dropped onto the fine china and crystal glasses like a concrete block. I did not scream. I did not act outraged. I did not need to defend myself against the absurd claim of being an unemployed addict. The sheer magnitude of my actual reality, validated by the patriarch of their desired family, did all the heavy lifting. I simply stood there, my posture relaxed, and looked directly at my sister. Madison had gone completely pale. The expensive bronzer on her cheeks stood out in stark contrast to her chalky, terrified skin. Her eyes darted frantically around the room, searching for an escape route that did not exist. The illusion she had carefully crafted over the past 2 years was evaporating into thin air. I offered her a small, razor-sharp smile. Unemployed, I asked, letting the word echo slightly in the quiet dining area. That is a creative way to describe the person who bought your engagement ring. The reaction was instantaneous. Jamal stood up from his chair. The polite, accommodating demeanor of a future son-in-law completely vanished. In its place was the sharp, clinical intensity of a man who diagnosed complex problems for a living. He looked down at Madison, who was visibly trembling, then shifted his intense gaze to his parents, and finally settled his eyes firmly on me. His jaw clenched tightly as his analytical mind processed the catastrophic disparity between the woman he thought he was marrying and the reality sitting in front of him. "What do you mean about the ring?" Jamal demanded, his deep voice carrying a commanding edge that cut right through the ambient noise of the restaurant. "Madison told me this ring was a cherished family heirloom passed down from your great-grandmother. She said it was a symbol of your family's generational legacy." Thomas choked on his breath. Diane gripped the edge of the table so hard her knuckles turned white. They knew I had the digital receipts for the custom flawless diamond sparkling on Madison's left hand. They had begged me to purchase it to keep up the facade of their wealth, promising they would pay me back. A promise they never intended to keep. I watched Dr. Thornton and his wife exchange horrified glances. They were refined people who valued honesty above all else, and they were currently watching an elaborate illusion shatter in real time. Mrs. Thornton pressed a hand to her chest, absolutely appalled by the brazen lie about the heirloom. Seeing the walls closing in rapidly, Madison resorted to the only tactic she had left. She could not argue facts, so she weaponized her emotions. Madison clutched her chest, her breathing suddenly becoming rapid and shallow. She let out a strained, high-pitched gasp and slumped sideways against the dining chair. "Jamal," she whimpered, her voice trembling with manufactured distress. "I cannot breathe. My chest is tight. Please, you have to help me. I am having a panic attack." She leaned heavily toward him, batting her tear-filled eyes, desperate to activate his medical instincts and redirect his attention away from my damning revelation. Thomas and Diane immediately jumped into the performance. "Oh, my poor baby." Diane shrieked, rushing to fan Madison with a cloth napkin. "Look what you have done, Claire. You are literally making your sister sick with your vicious lies." Thomas hovered over them, glaring at me with pure venom. "Give her some space," he ordered the table. "She is under an immense amount of stress preparing for this wedding. We need to get her back to the hotel suite immediately so she can recover in peace." Jamal did not move to coddle her. As a doctor, he could easily spot the difference between genuine physiological distress and a poorly executed theatrical performance. He watched Madison hyperventilate with cold, detached scrutiny. He did not reach out to check her pulse or offer soothing words. He just stood there, towering over the table, waiting for the charade to end. His silence was far more punishing than any verbal accusation could have been. Seeing that the fake medical emergency was failing to manipulate her fiancée, Diane lost whatever remained of her fragile composure. Her maternal performance instantly shifted into frantic, aggressive hostility. She realized that logic and tears were not working, so she resorted to brute force. Diane abandoned fanning Madison and marched directly toward me. Her face was twisted into an ugly snarl of desperation. The elegant country club persona she had spent decades cultivating evaporated entirely, leaving behind nothing but a cornered, panicked woman trying to salvage her final chance at high society status. "You are ruining the night," Diane screamed, completely ignoring the stunned expressions of Dr. Thornton and his wife as other restaurant patrons began to turn their heads. "You are ruining everything, just like you always do. Get out of here right now." Diane lunged forward, raising her hands to physically push me out of the dining area. She aimed to shove me back toward the private corridor, desperate to remove the living proof of their massive deception from Jamal's sight. She genuinely thought that if she could just force me out of the room, she could somehow spin the narrative back in their favor and blame the entire encounter on my supposed instability. I did not even flinch. I stood my ground, my eyes locked on the pathetic display of a woman who had spent her entire life prioritizing appearances over her own daughter. Before her hands could even graze the fabric of my suit jacket, Jamal intervened. He moved with lightning speed, stepping smoothly and firmly between my mother and me. He used his large athletic frame to create an impenetrable physical barrier, shielding me from Diane's aggressive advance. Diane crashed into his solid shoulder, stumbling backward in shock. Jamal looked down at my mother, his eyes blazing with a restrained fury that commanded absolute silence. The restaurant around us seemed to hold its breath. He did not raise his voice, but the absolute authority in his tone was terrifying. "Nobody is leaving," Jamal said, his eyes locking onto my parents with a lethal intensity. "Nobody is leaving until I get the truth." The absolute authority in Jamal's voice paralyzed my parents. Thomas slowly lowered his hand, stepping back from the invisible boundary Jamal had drawn between us. Diane stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing without producing a single sound. Jamal did not wait for their permission or their excuses. He turned his attention to his fiancée, who was still slumped in her chair, pretending to recover from her fabricated panic attack. He reached down, grasping Madison gently but firmly by the upper arm, and pulled her to her feet. Madison stumbled slightly, her expensive silk dress rustling loudly in the tense silence of the dining room. "We are going to step outside and have a private conversation," Jamal announced to the table at large. His parents, Dr. David and Mrs. Angela Thornton, nodded in solemn agreement. They were respected professionals who abhorred public scenes, and they trusted their son to handle the situation with quiet dignity. Jamal looked at me. "Claire, if you would please join us." I offered a curt nod. I had no reason to run or hide. I stepped around my mother, who was trembling with suppressed rage, and followed Jamal as he guided Madison out of the main dining floor. We moved past the curious stares of other wealthy patrons and the nervous whispers of the waitstaff. Jamal led us down a quiet, dimly lit corridor that connected the private event spaces. The thick floral-patterned carpet absorbed our footsteps, creating an eerie, insulated silence far away from the clinking glasses of the rehearsal dinner. As soon as we were out of sight from the main dining room, Madison went on the offensive. The fragile, hyperventilating victim vanished instantly. In her place emerged a vicious, cornered animal desperate to maintain her luxurious illusion. She ripped her arm out of Jamal's grasp and spun around to face him, fresh tears streaming down her perfectly contoured cheeks. "Jamal, you cannot possibly listen to this woman," Madison cried out, her voice echoing off the silk-lined walls of the hallway. "She is deeply unwell. My parents did not want to talk about it in front of your family, because it is our deepest shame. Claire is a pathological liar. She has been obsessed with ruining my life ever since we were children. She cannot stand that I found happiness, that I found you." I leaned casually against the patterned wallpaper, crossing my arms over my emerald green suit. I simply watched her perform. It was a masterclass in manipulation. She reached out, placing her hands flat against Jamal's chest, looking up at him with wide, pleading eyes. "She has been stalking my social media profiles." Madison sobbed, her voice cracking with manufactured grief. "She found out where we were having the rehearsal dinner and crashed it just to humiliate me. She is not a successful technology founder. That is another one of her psychotic delusions. She probably read a magazine article about some company and adopted it as her own identity. You heard my dad out there. She is estranged because she is dangerous. Please, Jamal, you have to protect me from her toxic lies." Jamal stood perfectly still, letting Madison's desperate words wash over him. He did not pull her into a comforting embrace. He did not whisper sweet reassurances into her hair. He simply looked down at her, his analytical mind dissecting her story, searching for the logic in her frantic narrative. He then slowly shifted his gaze to me, evaluating my physical response to these incredibly damaging accusations. I did not flinch. I did not raise my voice to defend my sanity or my career. I simply lifted my left wrist and casually checked the time on my watch. I was completely unbothered by her hysterical performance. "Madison," I said, keeping my voice even and impossibly calm, "I really do not care who you marry. You can spin whatever fairy tale you want for your future in-laws. You can tell them you are an elite influencer, a wealthy heiress, or foreign royalty. It makes absolutely no difference to me or my corporate bottom line. But do not stand there, look this intelligent man in the eye, and call me not real family, while wearing a $20,000 Cartier bracelet that I paid for. The words struck the quiet hallway like lightning. Madison physically recoiled, pulling her hands away from Jamal's chest, as if his shirt had suddenly caught fire. Instinctively, her right hand clamped down over her left wrist, desperately trying to conceal the gleaming gold and diamond jewelry resting against her skin. But she was far too late. Jamal had already seen it. The hallway sconces caught the brilliant sparkle of the diamonds embedded in the heavy gold band. Jamal's eyes narrowed, locking onto the bracelet Madison was now frantically trying to hide beneath the cuff of her silk dress. He remembered that exact bracelet. Madison had worn it proudly on their third date. She had told him it was a vintage piece she had purchased in Paris to celebrate her first major brand deal as a successful influencer. It was a cornerstone of the wealthy, independent persona she had sold him. Jamal stepped back, creating a deliberate physical distance between himself and his fiancée. The emotional warmth he usually reserved for her was entirely gone, replaced by the clinical detachment of a surgeon diagnosing a critical trauma. "There is a very simple way to clear this up right now," Jamal said, his voice dropping into a register of absolute command. He reached into his tailored suit jacket and pulled out his smartphone, holding it easily in his hand. "Madison, you told me your social media income pays for your luxury apartment, your car lease, and your high-end wardrobe. You told me you bought that Cartier bracelet yourself as a career milestone reward." Madison swallowed hard. Her breath hitched in her throat. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I did." Jamal nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving her terrified face. "Good," he replied. "Then open your banking app." The silence in the hallway was deafening. Madison stood frozen, her eyes wide with mounting horror. "Show me the transaction history." Jamal continued, his tone leaving absolutely zero room for negotiation or delay. "Open your phone right now. Show me the withdrawal for the bracelet. Show me the monthly rent payments for your downtown penthouse. If Claire is truly a delusional, unemployed liar who stalks you, then your financial records will prove your independence instantly. Just open the app and prove it." Madison took a step backward until her shoulder blades hit the wall. Her hands were shaking visibly. She looked from Jamal to me, then down at her designer clutch. "I cannot," she stammered, her voice pitching higher with fresh panic. "My phone, it is dead. The battery died right before we walked into the restaurant. I forgot to charge it at the hotel." Jamal stared at her, his expression hardening into unyielding stone. He knew she was lying. He had just watched her text her bridesmaids 10 minutes before the dinner started. Madison realized her excuse was failing spectacularly. She immediately pivoted, weaponizing her tears once again. "How can you do this to me?" she cried out, her voice dripping with venom and betrayal. "We are supposed to be getting married tomorrow. We are supposed to be building a life together. And you are demanding to audit my bank accounts in a restaurant hallway based on the insane ramblings of a woman who hates me. You do not trust me. You do not believe me. You are taking her side over your future wife." Madison's voice cracked with perfect manufactured heartbreak. She leaned against the silk-lined wall of the restaurant corridor, crossing her arms as if shielding herself from a physical blow. "You are going to let a jealous, unstable woman destroy our wedding on the very eve of our marriage. If you loved me, Jamal, you would not need to see my bank statements. You would just know I am telling the truth." I did not wait for Jamal to navigate the emotional minefield my sister had just laid out for him. I knew her tactics intimately. When cornered by facts, Madison always escalated to emotional blackmail. She was banking on Jamal's fundamental decency, hoping his desire to be a supportive partner would override his logical demand for evidence. I was not going to let that happen. "You do not have to show him your banking app, Madison," I said, breaking the tense silence. My voice was brisk and businesslike. I reached into my structured leather tote bag and pulled out my iPad Pro. "Because I can simply show him mine." I unlocked the tablet with a quick scan of my face. The bright screen illuminated the dim hallway, casting a sharp glow over Madison's terrified features. I tapped on my financial management application, navigating directly to my personal and corporate American Express Centurion dashboards. I filtered the search results by recipient and categorized the expenses over the past 24 months. I did not say another word. I simply stepped forward and handed the iPad directly to Jamal. Jamal took the tablet. He did not look at Madison. He looked down at the high-resolution screen. What you are looking at is the reality behind the influencer. I explained, my tone entirely conversational, as if I were guiding a board member through a quarterly earnings report. You will see a recurring monthly charge of $6,500. That is the rent for the luxury high-rise apartment Madison claims to pay for through her brand sponsorships. In reality, the lease is co-signed by my company, and the funds are auto-drafted from my personal account every first of the month. Jamal's eyes tracked down the screen. The muscles in his jaw tightened. Scroll down a bit further, I instructed calmly. You will find the itemized receipts for her lifestyle. The Cartier bracelet she is currently wearing on her left wrist. The lease payments for the Range Rover she drives. The business class flights she takes to her supposed brand trips. All of it was charged to my card. Our father Thomas came to my office begging for a family loan 2 years ago. He claimed Madison was on the verge of a major breakthrough but needed temporary seed money to maintain the right image for elite networking. I agreed to fund her temporarily to keep our parents from bankrupting themselves. I have been paying for her entire existence ever since. Madison let out a choked, desperate noise. Jamal, she is fabricating this. You can fake spreadsheets. Anyone can make a fake document on a computer. Jamal ignored her. He was scrolling. His thumb moved steadily over the glass screen, swiping through line after line of exorbitant expenses. His medical training required him to process massive amounts of data quickly and accurately, and right now he was diagnosing a terminal lie. He saw the transfers, he saw the vendor names, he saw the undeniable digital footprint of a woman who produced absolutely nothing of her own. Then Jamal's thumb stopped moving. He froze. The color drained from his face, replaced by a dark, simmering fury that I had not seen him display all evening. He stared at a specific transaction date from 3 months ago. I knew exactly which line item he had found. It was the crowning jewel of Madison's deception. The Rolex, Jamal said. His voice was completely hollow, stripped of all the warmth and love he had shown her just hours earlier in the lobby. Madison flinched as if he had struck her. She pressed her hands over her mouth, her eyes wide with absolute suffocating dread. A vintage platinum Rolex Daytona. Jamal continued reading the details straight from my American Express statement. Purchased at a luxury horology boutique in Chicago for $42,000. Paid in full. He slowly lifted his head and looked at his fiancée. The woman standing before him was no longer the successful, independent heiress he had fallen in love with. She was a complete stranger. You gave me that watch on the night we got engaged, Jamal said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, lethal whisper. You looked me in the eye and told me it was a cherished heirloom. You said your great-grandfather wore it and your father had kept it in a safety deposit box for decades, waiting to give it to the man you would marry. You told my parents it was a symbol of your family's generational legacy merging with ours. Madison began to openly sob. It was not a performance this time. It was the raw, ugly panic of a fraudster whose elaborate con had just spectacularly imploded. Jamal, please. I just wanted to give you something special. I wanted your parents to think I came from the same kind of background you did. I wanted to be worthy of you. By buying me a watch with your estranged sister's money and lying to my face about its history, Jamal asked, the disgust rolling off him in waves. I stepped back, allowing the devastation to fully settle between them. I had not come to the restaurant to break their hearts. I had come to conduct a business dinner. But Madison had forced my hand the moment she branded me socially unfit and tried to banish me from the very event I was financing. Jamal stared at the glowing screen of the iPad in his hands. The digital ledger was irrefutable proof. Every expensive dinner, every designer handbag, every symbol of status Madison had weaponized to impress the Thornton family had been bought and paid for by me. Her entire identity, the confident, wealthy, independent influencer who belonged in Atlanta's elite society, was a complete fabrication. And the foundation of that massive, towering lie was built entirely on the back of the sister she had just deemed unworthy to attend her wedding. He gripped the edges of the iPad, his knuckles turning white under the strain. The silence in the corridor stretched on, punctuated only by Madison's ragged, desperate breathing. She took a tentative step toward him, reaching out a trembling hand to touch his arm. "Do not touch me," Jamal commanded, his voice cracking like a whip. Madison snatched her hand back, shrinking against the floral wallpaper. "Jamal, we can fix this. It is just money. We love each other. That is what matters." "It has absolutely nothing to do with the money," Madison, Jamal replied, his eyes reflecting pure revulsion. "My family does not care about your net worth. We care about integrity. We care about honesty. You have spent the last 2 years looking me in the eye and lying about every single detail of your life. You let my parents welcome you into our home under completely false pretenses. You sat at that table tonight, sipping champagne, knowing you had uninvited the woman paying for the glass in your hand." I watched Jamal process the sheer scale of the betrayal. He was not just looking at a gold digger. He was looking at a person capable of profound cruelty toward her own flesh and blood. He realized that the sweet, charming woman he intended to marry was an illusion designed to trap him. He looked down at the iPad one last time, staring at the long list of charges that represented a masterclass in financial parasitism. The truth was inescapable. Madison was completely hollow. Her lifestyle, her luxury, her supposed generational wealth, none of it was real. The only real thing in the hallway was the statement glowing on the screen, proving that her entire existence was a parasite feeding off the sister she had tried to throw away. Before Jamal could process another line of the devastating credit card statement, the heavy oak doors at the end of the corridor swung open with a violent crash. The noise echoed down the narrow passage, shattering the tense silence that had enveloped us. Heavy, frantic footsteps pounded against the plush floral carpet. It was Thomas. My father marched into the hallway, his face flushed a deep, unhealthy crimson from the copious amounts of expensive wine he had been consuming and the sheer panic of losing his grip on the situation. He had clearly noticed our prolonged absence from the rehearsal dinner table and come to do damage control. Thomas expected to find Madison having a minor bridal breakdown that he could easily smooth over with a few charming jokes and a pat on Jamal's back. Instead, he skidded to a halt, his eyes widening as he took in the catastrophic scene before him. He saw Madison backed against the silk-lined wall, her perfectly contoured makeup ruined by ugly, desperate tears. He saw me standing with my arms crossed, projecting absolute impenetrable calm. And worst of all, he saw Jamal. The esteemed, brilliant surgeon was holding my silver iPad, staring down at the glowing screen with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. Thomas knew immediately that the game was over. The elaborate house of cards he had spent 2 years meticulously building had just been incinerated. The sudden realization that Jamal had seen the financial statements hit my father like a physical blow. I watched the transformation happen in real time. The jovial, wealthy suburban patriarch vanished into thin air. The charming smile he used to schmooze country club executives melted away, leaving behind the vicious, cornered narcissist I had known my entire life. Thomas did not rush to comfort his sobbing daughter. He did not attempt to apologize to the man she had systematically deceived. Instead, he locked his eyes onto me, and his face contorted with a rage so profound it bordered on madness. "You vindictive, heartless monster!" Thomas roared, his voice echoing loudly enough that I worried the restaurant staff might call security. He lunged toward me, pointing a thick, shaking finger inches from my face. "You just could not stand to see her happy, could you? You had to come here and destroy your sister's life. You are destroying this family's entire future out of pure malicious spite. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I looked at the finger pointing at my face, and then looked directly into my father's furious eyes. I am not destroying anything, I replied, my voice steady and icy cold. I simply provided the receipts. The truth destroyed your future, Thomas, not me. You call this the truth? Thomas spat, turning his desperate attention to Jamal. He frantically tried to snatch the iPad out of Jamal's hands, but the surgeon took a deliberate step backward, holding the device out of reach. Jamal, listen to me. You have to understand who you are dealing with here. Claire is not a normal person. She is a cold, calculating machine. She has no heart, no empathy, no understanding of what family means. Thomas was pacing the hallway, now his hands gesturing wildly as he spun the ultimate gaslighting narrative. He completely abandoned the lie that they were wealthy. Since the financial statements proved otherwise, he pivoted instantly to playing the victim of a tyrannical billionaire. She holds that money over our heads like a weapon. Thomas continued, his voice dripping with manufactured anguish. She thrives on humiliating us. Yes, we needed financial help. We are not ashamed of that. We are normal people trying to survive in a difficult economy. Claire offered to help her sister, but she never told us it would come with this kind of psychological torture. She waited for the perfect moment the night before the wedding to spring this trap, just to inflict maximum pain. She is a sociopath, Jamal. She lacks basic human decency. I stood silently marveling at his audacity. He was actually trying to convince a brilliant medical professional that giving someone hundreds of thousands of dollars in luxury goods was a form of psychological abuse. It was a spectacular display of narcissistic deflection. He was ignoring the lies, ignoring the fake Rolex, ignoring the fake heirloom stories, and making it entirely about my supposed lack of emotion. He painted himself as a humble suburban father, and Madison as a naive child, completely erasing the fact that they had explicitly banned me from the wedding just 24 hours prior. The sheer gymnastics required to turn their extortion into my villainy was almost impressive. And Madison Thomas pleaded, turning toward his weeping daughter and gesturing toward her like a tragic heroine. Madison is just a girl in love. She was intimidated by your family, Jamal. She was terrified that if you knew she came from a humble background, you would not think she was good enough for you. She made some mistakes, yes. She embellished her success because she was desperate to be worthy of a Thornton. It was an act of passion, not malice. Thomas stepped closer to Jamal, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial man-to-man whisper. You are a doctor. You understand human nature. Madison loves you with everything she has. She was just a young girl trying to impress the man of her dreams. Are you really going to let the cruel, calculating actions of a bitter, estranged sister ruin the greatest love you have ever known? Are you going to throw away a girl in love just because she wanted to be perfect for you? The hallway fell dead silent again. The only sound was Madison's ragged breathing as she looked up at Jamal. Her tear-streaked face silently begging him to accept her father's absurd, manipulative narrative. She was banking on the hope that his love for her would blind him to the glaring reality of her deceit. Jamal looked at Thomas. He did not blink. The raw, searing intelligence in his eyes cut through the thick layer of gaslighting like a scalpel. He did not look at Madison. He did not offer any comfort. He simply turned toward me and held out the iPad. I took the tablet from his hands, slipping it smoothly back into my leather tote bag. I met his gaze, offering a brief, silent acknowledgement of the difficult position he had been forced into. Jamal turned his attention back to my father. He stood tall, his broad shoulders squared, radiating the kind of dignified authority that Thomas could never hope to possess. He looked at the sweating, frantic man who had just tried to justify a masterclass in financial and emotional fraud as an act of romantic devotion. You think lying about every single aspect of your existence is an act of love? Jamal asked, his deep voice resonating with absolute chilling finality. You think handing me a watch bought with your estranged daughter's money and calling it a cherished family heirloom is just a mistake made by a girl in love? Thomas opened his mouth to argue, but Jamal raised a single hand, stopping him dead. My family does not do business with frauds, Jamal stated firmly. And I certainly do not marry them. Without another word, Jamal turned his back on my father and his weeping fiancée. He did not look back as he walked down the quiet, dimly lit corridor, his steady footsteps carrying him away from the wreckage of their lives and out of the hallway. The red light on the hotel payment terminal blinked with a mocking, steady rhythm. Declined. Thomas stared at the small digital screen as if it had just insulted him in a foreign language. It was Saturday morning, the day that was supposed to cement his family's status in elite society. Instead, the Waldorf Astoria hotel lobby felt like a luxurious execution chamber. Madison was sitting on a velvet sofa nearby, wrapped in her white bridal robe, hyperventilating into a paper bag. She was still frantically hitting redial on Jamal's blocked number, completely unraveling after he had walked out of the restaurant the night before and called off the wedding. The event coordinator pushed the credit card back across the polished marble counter. Her customer service smile was entirely gone. Sir, I have tried to process the authorization for the second time, she stated, her voice echoing loudly enough for passing guests to hear. The transaction for $240,000 has been rejected by your financial institution. If I do not have a successful payment method in the next 10 minutes, my staff has strict instructions to dismantle the ballroom and alert catering to dispose of the prepared inventory. Thomas snatched the plastic card from the counter, his hands trembling violently. His face was slick with a cold, terrified sweat. This is a technical error, he barked, his voice cracking under the immense pressure. I secured a private bridge loan yesterday afternoon. The wire transfer of $150,000 was guaranteed to hit my primary checking account by close of business yesterday. Your machine must be malfunctioning. Do not touch that ballroom. I am making a phone call right now. Thomas spun around and marched away from the reception desk, his expensive leather shoes slipping slightly on the slick marble floor. He moved toward a quiet alcove near the decorative indoor fountain, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He pulled his smartphone from his pocket and frantically scrolled through his recent contacts. He found the number for Vincent, the greasy private lender from Apex Holdings Group, who had eagerly approved their predatory mortgage loan less than 24 hours ago. He pressed the phone to his ear, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. The line rang once, twice, 3 times. With every passing second, Thomas felt the walls of his carefully constructed suburban fantasy closing in. Finally, the call connected. Where is my money? Thomas roared into the receiver, completely abandoning any pretense of professional courtesy. You looked me in the eye yesterday and promised that the wire transfer would clear immediately. I am standing in the lobby of a luxury hotel and my card is declining. Release my funds this instant before I sue your firm for breach of contract. There was a heavy, chilling silence on the other end of the line. When Vincent finally spoke, the predatory, eager salesman tone he had used yesterday was completely eradicated. In its place was the cold, clinical voice of a corporate underwriter delivering a death sentence. Mr. Anderson, Vincent said slowly, enunciating every single syllable with brutal clarity. You are in absolutely no position to threaten my firm with legal action. In fact, you are incredibly lucky I have not reported you to the authorities for attempting to commit massive mortgage fraud. Thomas froze. His pacing stopped instantly. The ambient noise of the hotel lobby seemed to fade away, leaving only the sound of his own ragged breathing. What are you talking about? Thomas demanded, though his voice had lost all its aggressive volume. We signed the collateral agreement. You took the deed to my house. I own that estate free and clear. It is worth double the amount of the loan I asked for. Vincent let out a harsh, humorless laugh that scraped against Thomas's ear. That is exactly the problem, Thomas. You see, when you submit a property for collateral, our underwriting department runs a mandatory deep dive title search to verify ownership and check for outstanding liabilities. Your application triggered an automatic manual review at midnight because the title search returned catastrophic results. Thomas felt a cold drop of sweat slide down his spine. Results, he echoed weakly. What results? I paid off my mortgage years ago. There is no bank lien on my house. There is no bank lien, Vincent corrected sharply. Because a bank would not touch you. You have a massive six-figure federal tax lien attached to your name. Our investigators pulled your financial history. 3 years ago, you were facing a federal indictment from the Internal Revenue Service for severe tax evasion, hiding assets, and corporate fraud. You were weeks away from having your assets seized by the government and facing a lengthy federal prison sentence. Thomas gasped, his hand clutching his chest. He remembered that terrifying period perfectly. He had hidden money to maintain his country club lifestyle, and the IRS had caught him. He thought his expensive defense attorney had found a miraculous loophole to make the debt vanish and keep him out of jail. He had never questioned how the massive federal debt was suddenly settled, too relieved by the outcome to look a gift horse in the mouth. Your debt did not just magically disappear, Vincent continued, reading directly from the underwriting report. Your estate was quietly bought out of foreclosure. The entire $400,000 tax penalty was paid off in a single lump sum cash transaction by a private corporate entity. That entity satisfied the federal government and subsequently took the absolute deed to your suburban home as collateral for the bailout. You do not own that house, Thomas. You have not owned it for 3 years. You are essentially a glorified tenant living there at the mercy of the lien holder. The marble floor felt as though it were dropping out from underneath Thomas's feet. His vision blurred at the edges. He leaned heavily against the stone edge of the indoor fountain to keep himself from collapsing. A corporate entity, Thomas whispered, his mind racing through the terrifying implications. What corporate entity? Who holds the deed to my house? Vincent shuffled some papers on his desk. The sound echoed loudly over the phone line. The corporate entity that holds the absolute deed, the primary lien, and the total ownership rights to your suburban estate is Vanguard Financial Solutions. Thomas stopped breathing. His eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated horror. He knew that name. He had seen it on the business cards, the magazine covers, and the corporate credit card statements he had just been examining the night before. Vincent delivered the final devastating blow with absolute precision. Our parent company just acquired Apex Holdings yesterday, so I had to report your fraudulent loan application directly to our new chief executive officer. The sole proprietor, founder, and CEO of Vanguard Financial Solutions is your daughter, Claire. You tried to illegally mortgage a house that she already owns. Your loan is denied, your file is flagged for fraud, and your daughter holds the keys to your entire life. Have a terrible day, Thomas. The line went dead. Thomas stood in the luxurious lobby, gripping his silent phone, finally realizing that the daughter he had treated like garbage had been the only thing keeping him out of federal prison. And now he had just handed her the perfect excuse to lock him out of his own home. The red light on the hotel payment terminal blinked its final rejection. Thomas stood frozen by the indoor fountain, the dial tone buzzing in his ear. He lowered his smartphone, his hand trembling violently. The illusion of their wealthy suburban life was actively vaporizing. Diane rushed over her expensive heels, clicking sharply against the marble. What did Vincent say? Diane demanded, her voice shrill with mounting hysteria. Where is the wire transfer? The coordinator is giving us 5 minutes before she cancels the ballroom. Thomas looked at his wife, his face completely devoid of color. We do not have the money. He whispered the words, scraping against his dry throat. We are not getting the loan. Diane gasped, her hand flying to her chest. Why not? What happened? Thomas swallowed hard. We do not own the house, Diane. Thomas choked out the reality of his catastrophic financial mismanagement crashing down. There is a massive lien on the property. We cannot use it as collateral. Diane stared at him as if he had spoken in a foreign language. What are you talking about? We paid off that IRS debt 3 years ago. The lawyer handled it. We own that estate. Thomas shook his head violently. No, we do not. The lawyer did not find a magic loophole. A corporate entity bought the debt and took the deed as collateral to keep us out of federal prison. Diane's eyes widened in sheer terror. What corporate entity? She asked, her voice trembling. Thomas looked at his wife, the bitter, humiliating truth finally forcing its way out. Vanguard Financial Solutions. It is Claire. Claire owns our house. The revelation hit Diane with the force of a freight train. She staggered backward, bumping into Madison, who was still clutching her crumpled paper bag. Madison looked between her parents, her mascara smeared down her cheeks, her white bridal robe slipping off one shoulder. "What does that mean?" Madison shrieked, completely unequipped to handle actual adversity. "What about my wedding? What about Jamal?" Thomas ignored his youngest daughter's theatrics. A primal, desperate rage was boiling up inside him. He refused to accept that the daughter he had belittled for her entire life was the architect of his salvation and orchestrator of his ruin. "She planned this." Thomas snarled, his face contorting into a mask of vicious fury. "She waited until the morning of the wedding to trap us. She wants to see us humiliated. Well, I am not going to let her win. She is staying right here in the penthouse suite. We are going up there right now, and she is going to fix this." Without waiting for the hotel coordinator to officially cancel the event, Thomas stormed past the reception desk and headed straight for the private VIP elevators. Diane and Madison scrambled to keep up a chaotic train of silk robes, smeared makeup, and unhinged entitlement. Thomas slammed his fist against the elevator call button. When the gold doors slid open, they piled inside. The ride to the top floor felt agonizingly slow. The soft instrumental elevator music mocked their absolute devastation. Diane paced the small mirrored space, muttering curses under her breath, blaming me for deliberately destroying the family's reputation. Madison was weeping loudly, bemoaning the loss of her high society future, entirely ignoring the fact that her own lies had driven Jamal away. Thomas simply stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched so tightly his teeth ground together. He was preparing for a war, completely blind to the fact that he had already lost. The elevator chimed softly as it reached the penthouse level. The doors opened to a quiet, immaculate hallway lined with plush carpeting and modern art. Thomas marched down the corridor, his heavy footsteps muffled by the thick flooring. He stopped in front of the double mahogany doors of the presidential suite. He did not bother knocking politely. He raised his fist and began pounding on the heavy wood with explosive, violent force. "Open this door right now!" Thomas roared, his voice echoing down the empty, luxurious hallway. "Open the door, Claire. I know you are in there. You cannot hide from us after what you just did." Diane joined in, slapping her palms against the wood. "How could you be so evil?" she screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria. "Open this door and pay the venue. You are ruining your sister's life." After a few moments of relentless pounding, the heavy mahogany doors finally clicked unlocked. The door swung inward on silent hinges. Standing in the foyer of the sprawling, sunlit penthouse suite was me. I was completely unbothered by the chaotic scene unfolding on my doorstep. I was dressed in a plush white monogrammed hotel robe, the thick fabric belted neatly at my waist. My hair was perfectly styled, and my face was calm and rested. In my right hand, I casually held a small porcelain cup of freshly brewed espresso. I took a slow, deliberate sip, letting the rich aroma fill the tense space between us. I looked at my family as if they were nothing more than a minor expected inconvenience. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice steady and icy cold. "I am enjoying my morning coffee before my flight back to Chicago." Thomas pushed his way half a step into the foyer, his face purple with rage. "Do not play games with me," he spat, pointing a shaking finger directly at my face. "I just got off the phone with the lending agency. You stole my house. You went behind my back, manipulated the financial records, and stole the deed to the family estate. You are a criminal, Claire, and I am going to have you arrested for fraud." Diane pushed forward, her eyes wild. "You are a monster," she shrieked. "You planned this entire thing just to leave us homeless and humiliate Madison on her wedding day. You have to sign that deed back over to us right now, and you have to march downstairs and pay for this ballroom." I simply took another sip of my espresso, savoring the bitter, complex flavor of the dark roast. I looked at the three of them, a pathetic portrait of entitlement and desperation. They were demanding salvation, while simultaneously hurling accusations completely oblivious to their own massive hypocrisy. I lowered the porcelain cup and met my father's furious gaze with absolute unyielding authority. I did not steal it, I said, my voice cutting through their hysterical screaming like a freshly sharpened blade. I paid off your $400,000 tax debt to keep you out of federal prison and took the deed as collateral, a detail you conveniently forgot when you tried to illegally mortgage a house you do not own. The heavy words hung silently in the cold air of the extremely luxurious penthouse hallway, completely extinguishing the fiery burning rage that had just propelled my entire family up the hotel elevator. I watched the aggressive posture melt away from my father's shoulders. The realization of his catastrophic mistake hit him with the force of an avalanche. Thomas was not just facing public humiliation or the loss of a suburban country club lifestyle. He was suddenly staring down the barrel of federal fraud charges and the absolute certainty of impending homelessness. The terrifying truth paralyzed him. He had just tried to mortgage a property he did not own, submitting fraudulent applications to a corporate entity that I controlled. Thomas looked at Diane, whose manic screaming hysteria had abruptly vanished. Her face was entirely drained of color, her eyes wide with a profound, suffocating panic. The expensive facade she had maintained for decades shattered completely in front of my door. Diane's knees simply gave out. She collapsed onto the plush hallway carpet, her designer dress bunching around her legs. Thomas immediately followed, dropping to his knees beside his wife. It was a pathetic, staggering reversal. Just moments ago, they were demanding my compliance and threatening my reputation. Now they were kneeling on the floor of a luxury hotel looking up at me with raw, unfiltered terror. "Please, Claire," my mother begged, her voice cracking into a pathetic whimper. "You cannot do this to us. You cannot throw us out on the street. We will lose everything. We will be ruined. We are your parents. You have to show us some mercy." Thomas clasped his hands together in front of his chest, completely abandoning his pride. He was a man drowning, desperately reaching for the very person he had tried to hold under the water. "Claire, I am begging you." Thomas pleaded, his voice thick with tears he had never shed for my struggles. "Do not report the loan application. Do not take the house. We were just desperate to give Madison the wedding she deserved. We did not know the holding company belonged to you. We just wanted to survive this weekend. I will do anything you ask. I will work for you. I will pay you back every single cent. Just please do not send me to federal prison." I looked down at the two people who had spent my entire life making me feel small, inadequate, and utterly disposable. They were not apologizing for the years of emotional abuse. They were not apologizing for draining my college fund or for cutting me out of family photos. They were only apologizing because they had been caught committing a felony, and because the daughter they deemed a failure held their entire existence in the palm of her hand. I took another slow, deliberate sip of my espresso, letting the heavy silence stretch and amplify their well-deserved humiliation. I stood there looking at them and realized that I finally held all the cards. I felt no pity for them. I felt no lingering family obligation. I felt absolutely nothing for the selfish, greedy people sobbing pathetically on the expensive hotel floor. Before I could address my parents' pathetic groveling, Madison pushed her way forward. She stepped over our mother's kneeling form, her white silk bridal robe dragging along the carpet. Madison's face was still streaked with ruined makeup from her earlier confrontation with Jamal. She was completely unhinged, entirely disconnected from the reality of her parents' impending criminal charges and homelessness. In Madison's narcissistic mind, the only tragedy occurring was the cancellation of her high society wedding. "Claire, you have to fix this," Madison demanded, her voice shrill and trembling with desperate entitlement. "You have to call Jamal right now. He will listen to you because you are rich and successful." Tell him you made up those credit card statements. Tell him it was a massive misunderstanding and that I am exactly who I said I was. You have enough money to make this entire problem disappear." I stared at my sister in sheer disbelief. Her parents were kneeling on the floor facing federal prison, and she was commanding me to lie to a brilliant pediatric surgeon just so she could secure her wealthy lifestyle. Madison reached out her hands shaking as she tried to grasp the sleeve of my plush hotel robe. I stepped back, avoiding her touch with a look of absolute revulsion. "Please, Claire," Madison sobbed, dropping to her knees right next to Thomas and Diane. "If you just call Jamal and fix my relationship, I will give you anything you want. I will make everything right between us. I will even let you be my maid of honor. You can stand right next to me at the altar today. I will tell his family that we worked through our differences. Just make him come back to me." She actually thought tossing me a pathetic, entirely fake token of sisterly affection would erase decades of cruelty and suddenly secure her a lifetime of endless luxury. It was the ultimate insult, proving that she still viewed me as a desperate, lonely woman eager for her scraps of approval. I lowered my espresso cup, feeling a profound sense of closure wash over my entire body. The years of trying to earn their love, the years of bailing them out, the years of enduring their endless toxic comparisons, it all finally ended right here in this quiet hotel hallway. I looked down at the three people kneeling at my feet. They looked pathetic, broken, and entirely stripped of their power. I looked Madison dead in the eye, my voice echoing loudly with cold, icy, unshakable finality. "I am so sorry," I said, perfectly mirroring the exact cruel text message she had sent me just a few very short days ago when she thought she had already won. "You guys are too socially unfit for me to associate with. Real family only." With those final words, I stepped back and firmly pulled the heavy mahogany doors shut. The solid thud of the latch engaging echoed with absolute finality. I simply turned around, walked over to the kitchen island, and set down my empty espresso cup. My pulse was steady. The suffocating weight of lifelong familial obligation had vanished completely. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows and looked out over the sprawling city, feeling a profound sense of peace. The morning light filtered into the luxurious space, warming the pristine environment. My business here was concluded. It was over. Out in the hallway, the reality of their catastrophic failure descended rapidly upon Thomas, Diane, and Madison. They remained slumped on the carpeted floor for several long minutes, paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of their ruin. Their desperate wailing soon faded into a hollow, stunned silence. Their shock was abruptly interrupted. The soft chime of the VIP elevator echoed down the corridor. The brass doors slid open, and two hotel security guards stepped out, accompanied by the stern event coordinator, who had been waiting for the unpaid balance. The coordinator marched down the hallway. "Mr. and Mrs. Anderson," she said, her voice sharp and devoid of sympathy. "The deadline for your payment authorization has officially passed. Your credit cards have repeatedly declined and your bank has refused to clear any wire transfers. As per hotel policy, your reservations are terminated immediately." Thomas scrambled to his feet, his face red with embarrassment. "Now listen here," he stammered. "We just need a little more time to liquidate some assets. You cannot just throw us out. My daughter is supposed to be getting married in your ballroom today." The coordinator crossed her arms. "There is no wedding today, sir," she replied with absolute icy detachment. "The groom's family formally canceled the reservation an hour ago and withdrew their personal deposits. Furthermore, you owe the hotel over $40,000 just for the catering prep and the suite rentals you have occupied for the past 3 days. Since you cannot produce a valid payment method, hotel management has instructed security to escort you off the premises immediately. Pack your belongings and vacate the property, or we will call local law enforcement and press charges for defrauding an innkeeper." Diane gasped, clutching her chest. "You cannot treat us like criminals," she shrieked. "We are respectable people." The guard stepped forward. 15 minutes, the taller guard stated. "Let us go." The march back to their luxury suite was an agonizing display of pure humiliation. Once inside, sheer panic overtook them. Diane and Madison frantically shoved designer dresses, cosmetics, and shoes into their oversized suitcases. They were packing like fugitives. Madison wept hysterically as she stripped off her white silk bridal robe, realizing she had absolutely no reason to wear it. The fairy tale was dead, replaced by the grim reality of an impending police escort. When the 15 minutes expired, the guards knocked sharply on the open door. "Time is up. Take what you have and leave the keys on the counter." Thomas reached for the telephone to call for a bellhop. The coordinator shook her head. "Your account is frozen. We are not providing bell service for guests who have defrauded the hotel. You will have to carry your own luggage." The humiliation deepened as Thomas, Diane, and Madison were forced to drag their own massive, overstuffed suitcases down the hallway. They struggled with the heavy bags, the wheels catching on the thick carpet. They rode the elevator down in suffocating silence, flanked by security. When the elevator doors opened on the main level, they were forced to walk the gauntlet of the grand lobby. This was exactly where Madison had planned to make her triumphant entrance. Now it was the stage for her ultimate disgrace. Dragging their luggage across the polished marble floor, they walked directly past the grand ballroom. The towering arches of imported white roses and orchids were currently being aggressively dismantled by a crew of irritated florists. Hotel staff stopped to watch the procession. Guests whispered behind their hands, pointing at the weeping bride and her sweating, disheveled parents being marched out by security. The walk felt like an eternity. They were completely exposed as frauds, deeply in debt and powerless. The heavy glass doors slid open, depositing them out into the sweltering Atlanta heat. The security guards stood at the entrance, ensuring they did not attempt to re-enter the building. Thomas pulled out his phone with trembling hands. His premium ride-share accounts were linked to the credit cards that had just been frozen. He had to manually download a budget ride app and request the cheapest available economy car, wincing at the surge pricing he could barely afford. They stood on the hot concrete curb, sweating profusely under the blazing sun. Madison slumped against her suitcase, hiding her face to avoid the stares of passing valet drivers. Diane stared blankly at the busy street, the reality of their destitute situation breaking her spirit completely. As they waited in agonizing silence for their discount rideshare to arrive, Thomas felt his smartphone vibrate in his palm. He looked down at the screen, hoping for a miracle, perhaps a notification from his bank saying the funds had miraculously cleared. Instead, he saw a stark email notification displaying an unfamiliar corporate logo. Thomas opened the email, scanning the bold legal text. The blood instantly drained from his face, leaving him looking like a ghost in the bright sunlight. His hands shook violently, almost dropping the device. It was a formal communication from Vanguard Financial Solutions, the property management firm entirely owned and operated by his eldest daughter. It was a legally binding, indisputable 30-day eviction notice. The message stated clearly that due to gross financial insolvency and attempted mortgage fraud, the current occupants of the suburban estate were required to vacate the premises immediately. Thomas stared at the screen, the final nail in the coffin of his ruined life securely fastened. They had absolutely nowhere to go. 2 weeks had passed since the catastrophic implosion at the Waldorf Astoria. I was back in Chicago, sitting at the head of the long conference table in my corporate headquarters. The sweeping views of the city skyline served as the perfect backdrop for the absolute dismantling of my biological family's financial parasitic hold on my life. Sitting around the table were the senior partners of my legal representation and the director of my public relations department. We were conducting a surgical strike on every single remaining financial tie connecting me to Thomas, Diane, and Madison. I slid a thick stack of finalized documents across the polished mahogany table to my lead attorney, Mr. Harrison. The first document was the finalized eviction order. The mandatory 30-day notice I had issued while they were standing on the hotel curb was halfway through its countdown. My parents had made zero effort to contest it, likely because they knew they had absolutely no legal standing to fight the legitimate owner of the property. But the eviction was just the beginning. I instructed my team to systematically sever every hidden line of credit and shared expense. Madison's luxury SUV lease, which was under my corporate umbrella, was officially terminated. The dealership was already dispatching a recovery team to repossess the vehicle from the driveway of the suburban estate. The premium health insurance plans, the unlimited cellular data accounts, and the exorbitant country club membership dues that were auto-drafted from my secondary accounts were all terminated. I canceled every single one of them with a few strokes of my pen. I was completely cutting off the oxygen to their fake high society lifestyle. Mr. Harrison reviewed the final cancellation confirmations. "You are entirely legally insulated, Claire," he assured me, adjusting his glasses. "They cannot pull a single cent from your accounts, and the eviction process is moving forward without any judicial roadblocks." However, my public relations director, a sharp woman named Naomi, cleared her throat and turned her laptop screen toward me. "We have a slight complication regarding the public optics." Naomi pressed play on a video that had been uploaded to multiple social media platforms just an hour prior. It was Thomas. My father was sitting in the dimly lit study of the house I owned, staring into a camera with a pathetic, manufactured expression of profound grief. He was wearing a slightly wrinkled dress shirt, deliberately trying to look like a broken, exhausted man. "My daughter is a monster," Thomas declared to the camera, his voice trembling with fake emotion. "I gave her everything. I raised her, fed her, and loved her. And how does she repay her family? By using her massive tech wealth to illegally steal her childhood home. She is a ruthless, abusive tyrant who is currently throwing her elderly parents and her devastated younger sister out onto the street. She destroyed my youngest daughter's wedding out of pure malicious jealousy. Do not do business with her company. She is a sociopath." Thomas had tagged my financial technology firm, several of my high-profile venture capital investors, and various local Chicago news outlets. It was a desperate, flailing attempt to weaponize public opinion. He thought that by painting me as a greedy, ungrateful billionaire, he could force me into a settlement to protect his corporate image and get his hands on my money. He severely underestimated my preparation. I did not feel a single ounce of anger watching his pathetic performance. I just felt a cold, clinical satisfaction. He had walked right into the trap. Naomi looked at me, her fingers hovering over her keyboard. "How do you want to handle this, Claire? We can issue a standard corporate denial, or have the legal team petition the platforms to remove the video for defamation." I shook my head. "A standard denial makes it look like we have something to hide." I turned to my lead attorney. "Mr. Harrison, please draft a formal cease and desist order immediately. But do not just send standard legal threats. Attach the comprehensive underwriting report from his attempted bridge loan. Include the documents bearing his signature where he committed federal mortgage fraud by attempting to leverage a property he does not own. And just for good measure, attach the unsealed public records of his massive IRS tax evasion case from 3 years ago." Mr. Harrison smiled a sharp, predatory grin. "A tactical nuke, then." "Exactly," I confirmed. "Send it directly to his personal email and copy his remaining business associates. Give him exactly 1 hour to permanently delete every social media post, issue a written retraction, and publicly apologize. Tell him that if the video is not gone by the end of the hour, I will personally hand-deliver the fraud documents to the federal prosecutor and the local district attorney. He can choose between social media clout or a 10-year sentence in federal prison." The legal notice was drafted, reviewed, and electronically served within 20 minutes. We sat in the conference room watching the digital clock on the wall count down. Thomas was a narcissist, but he was not entirely stupid when his own freedom was directly threatened. He knew the IRS was already incredibly familiar with his name. Another federal charge would guarantee he died behind bars. It took exactly 14 minutes for the capitulation to occur. Naomi refreshed her browser. The video vanished from the internet. The entire social media account was suddenly deactivated. Every single post, comment, and tag was scrubbed from existence. 10 minutes later, my inbox chimed with an email from Thomas. It contained no excuses, no gaslighting, and no fake apologies. It was just a stark, terrified two-sentence message confirming the posts were deleted and begging me not to contact the federal authorities. The threat of prison time had completely and utterly silenced them. Their absolute defeat was finalized. The realization that they had no money, no leverage, and no public voice crushed whatever remaining defiance they held. With their reputation completely incinerated, and the very real threat of the police knocking on their door, Thomas and Diane could not bear the thought of facing their wealthy country club neighbors. The humiliation of a public daytime eviction was too much for their fragile egos to handle. That night, under the cover of absolute darkness, the final pathetic chapter of their suburban illusion played out. I received a notification from the security cameras installed around the exterior of the property. I opened the live feed on my phone and watched the grainy black and white footage. The driveway was illuminated only by the pale glow of the streetlights. Thomas, Diane, and Madison were frantically hauling black garbage bags and battered suitcases out of the front door. Madison's luxury SUV had already been repossessed, so they were forced to cram their meager remaining possessions into the back of a cheap rented moving van. I watched Diane stumble under the weight of a taped-up cardboard box, her posture completely broken. Madison was crying, dragging a trash bag full of her designer clothes across the concrete, her influencer career completely destroyed. They moved with frantic, panicked speed, constantly looking over their shoulders, terrified that a neighbor might wake up and witness their monumental disgrace. They were fleeing the life they had built on lies, scurrying away into the dead of night to avoid the blinding light of their own catastrophic ruin. 6 months passed. The blistering heat of that disastrous Atlanta summer faded into the biting chill of a Chicago winter, freezing the last remnants of my biological family's former existence. The contrast between the brilliant life I built and the grim reality they now inhabited was absolute. There were no more sprawling country club estates or luxury leased vehicles. Thomas and Diane were currently residing in a cramped, poorly insulated two-bedroom apartment situated in a declining suburban strip mall complex far outside the city limits. The thin drywall offered zero soundproofing, forcing them to listen to the constant grating noise of the busy interstate just outside their single-barred window. They had avoided federal prison by the skin of their teeth, but the massive financial penalties and legal fees from their attempted mortgage fraud had drained whatever hidden cash reserves they had scraped together. Stripped of his executive title and blacklisted from any reputable corporate position, Thomas was forced to take a minimum wage job working the graveyard shift at a big box hardware store. His hands, once soft and manicured from years of gripping expensive golf clubs, were now calloused, blistered, and perpetually stained with warehouse dirt. The man who used to arrogantly boast about his stock portfolio was now spending his nights stocking heavy bags of fertilizer and taking orders from a regional manager half his age. Diane's daily reality was equally punishing. The polished matriarch, who used to look down on service workers, was now employed as a part-time cashier at a discount clothing retailer. Her feet, used to resting in custom designer heels, now throbbed relentlessly after standing for 8-hour shifts on unforgiving concrete floors. She spent her days scanning clearance tags and folding discarded sweaters, completely unrecognizable without her expensive cosmetic treatments and high-end wardrobe. Their country club friends had blocked their numbers months ago. They were entirely isolated, drowning in a sea of minimum payments and suffocating regret. Madison's spectacular fall from grace was perhaps the most public and humiliating of them all. Her carefully curated influencer career imploded with breathtaking speed. In the digital age, secrets are impossible to keep, especially when you leave a trail of unpaid luxury vendors in your wake. The caterers, the florists, and the event staff from the cancelled Waldorf Astoria wedding took to social media to expose the massive unpaid invoices. Internet sleuths connected the dots, analyzing her past posts and uncovering the staggering truth. They realized her designer bags were suddenly missing from her feed. They noticed she was no longer filming in a luxury downtown penthouse. The illusion shattered completely when a local Atlanta gossip blog published a detailed timeline of the fake wedding and the catastrophic rehearsal dinner fallout. Madison lost hundreds of thousands of followers in a matter of days. Brand deals were instantly revoked. Sponsors sent legal demands for the return of gifted merchandise, stripped of her digital validation and my unlimited credit card. Madison was forced to enter the actual workforce for the first time in her life. She currently works as a front desk receptionist at a mid-tier strip mall medical spa. Every day she has to wear a cheap, ill-fitting polyester uniform and schedule cosmetic appointments for wealthy women who live the exact lifestyle she permanently lost. She is forced to smile and offer cucumber water to women carrying the very same luxury bags she used to pretend she bought herself. She sits behind a laminate counter, seething with a bitter, toxic resentment, utterly powerless to change her circumstances. She spends her lunch break scrolling through the social media accounts of her former friends, watching them attend galas and travel to tropical resorts, knowing she will never be allowed back into that elite world. Meanwhile, the man she tried to trap was thriving. Jamal returned to his pediatric surgical fellowship in Atlanta with a renewed sense of purpose and profound relief. He had dodged a catastrophic life-ruining bullet. The Thorntons, a family of genuine integrity and deep community roots, closed ranks and protected him from the minor social fallout of the canceled wedding. Without the constant financial drain and emotional manipulation of his fake heiress, fiancé Jamal excelled. He was recently promoted to chief resident and spearheaded a new community health initiative for underprivileged youth. He sent me a brief, highly professional email a few months after the incident, thanking me for having the courage to expose the truth before he made the biggest mistake of his life. We did not keep in touch after that, respecting the boundary between our separate lives, but I felt a quiet satisfaction knowing a good man had escaped a terrible fate. He was building a brilliant future completely unburdened by the parasitic weight of my sister. My own life in Chicago was a testament to the peace that follows absolute detachment. My financial technology firm was preparing for an initial public offering, and my days were filled with fulfilling high-level strategic planning. I had changed my personal phone number, upgraded my building security, and instructed my corporate legal team to automatically intercept any mail bearing my parents' return address. I was completely unreachable. But desperation breeds extreme measures. On a freezing Tuesday evening, as I sat by the fireplace in my penthouse reviewing some contracts, my private emergency cell phone buzzed. This was a highly restricted number known only to my board of directors and my closest inner circle. I picked up the device and saw an unknown, unlisted number on the screen. It was a prepaid burner phone. I let it go to voicemail, my instincts already calculating the risk. A minute later, the digital transcription of the voicemail popped up on my screen, followed by the audio file. I pressed play. The sound of frantic, ugly sobbing filled my quiet living room. It was Madison. Her voice was hoarse, stripped of any influencer polish, reduced to a pathetic, ragged whine. "Claire, please, Madison," wept into the burner phone, the background noise of cheap traffic roaring behind her. "I know you hate me. I know I ruined everything. But I have absolutely nothing left. My car broke down, the spa cut my hours, and Mom and Dad cannot even afford their utility bills. I am begging you. I just need a few $100s for groceries. I am so hungry, Claire. Please just send something." I paused the audio exactly 2 seconds into the pathetic, manipulative plea. I did not listen to the rest of her fabricated tears. I did not feel a single ounce of guilt or sisterly obligation. I did not feel the familiar toxic urge to open my wallet and fix her self-inflicted crisis. I felt absolutely nothing at all. The invisible chains that had bound me to their dysfunction were completely shattered. I tapped the screen with a steady finger. I permanently deleted the voicemail, wiping her voice from my device. I blocked the burner number, ensuring she could never penetrate my peace again. I permanently deleted the voicemail completely, wiping her voice from my personal device. I blocked the burner number permanently, ensuring she could never penetrate my peace again. I set the smartphone face down and took a deep breath. The silence in my penthouse was the sound of absolute freedom. I stepped gracefully into the warm, sunlit expanse of my main living area. Today was Thanksgiving Day, a holiday that used to fill me with dread. Thanksgiving meant enduring harsh criticisms from my mother, posing for forced family photographs, and listening to endless financial demands disguised as tradition. But today, the air in my home felt entirely different. It smelled of roasted rosemary, fresh cinnamon, and genuine joy. I recently purchased a stunning historic estate in one of Chicago's most exclusive neighborhoods. It was an architectural masterpiece constructed of imported stone and glass. Unlike the hollow, heavily mortgaged suburban house my parents had lost to their own greed, every inch of this magnificent property was owned outright by me, free and clear of debt. The massive dining table, carved from a single slab of reclaimed walnut, was set for 12 guests. There were no rented crystal goblets to impress strangers, no pretentious centerpieces designed to project fake wealth. There were just mismatched ceramic plates, warm candlelight, and an abundance of incredible food. The roaring stone fireplace cast a brilliant light across the spacious room. I walked into the custom chef kitchen where the atmosphere was chaotic in the best possible way. Standing at the kitchen island was Ryan, my supportive, incredibly loving partner. He was laughing warmly, his sleeves casually rolled up as he expertly carved a roasted turkey. Ryan was a brilliant structural architect who loved me for my sharp mind, my relentless drive, and my fierce independence. He never asked me to shrink myself to make his ego feel bigger. He celebrated my financial success instead of feeling threatened by it, standing right beside him were my two company co-founders, Nate and Olivia. We spent years together in a cramped, freezing garage building our financial technology firm from absolute scratch. They brought me hot coffee when I worked 48-hour coding shifts. They cheered for my first software victory, and they fiercely defended my character when my biological family told me I was wasting my life. They were my real family. The room was filled with loud laughter, the clinking of expensive wine glasses, and the easy conversation of people who possessed absolutely nothing to hide and nothing to prove. As we began carrying the steaming platters of food out to the main dining table, the private security intercom on my wall chimed softly. My building concierge announced that a special holiday delivery had arrived. A few minutes later, the private elevator doors slid open and a uniformed staff member carefully wheeled in a truly breathtaking floral arrangement. It was an elegant display of rare white orchids, deep red roses, and lush winter greenery, arranged in a heavy, custom crystal vase. I approached the display and pulled the thick, cream-colored envelope tucked safely among the delicate branches. I opened the wax seal and read the flowing handwritten script inside. It was from Dr. David and Mrs. Angela Thornton. The beautiful card read, "To our dearest Claire, on a day dedicated entirely to gratitude, we want to express our profound heartfelt thanks for your continued remarkable philanthropic work with our pediatric surgical wing. You have changed countless children's lives, and you have deeply touched ours. We are forever grateful for your unyielding integrity, your brilliant mind, and your incredible generosity. We are wishing you a beautiful, warm holiday, surrounded by the love and respect you so richly deserve." I traced my fingers over the heavy cardstock, a profound healing warmth expanding rapidly in my chest. The patriarch and matriarch of elite Atlanta society, the very same people my mother and sister had tried so desperately to impress with stolen money and fabricated lies, were sending me their genuine respect and gratitude. They saw my authentic value. They did not respect me because of a fake designer watch or a rehearsed country club pedigree. They respected me because of the tangible, life-saving impact I made on the real world. I placed the handwritten card prominently on the stone mantelpiece above the roaring fire and walked back to the head of the long dining table. Ryan pulled out my chair, pressing a soft kiss to my temple before sitting down beside me. I looked around the long walnut table. I saw the glowing, incredibly happy faces of my business colleagues, my mentors, and my closest friends. These were the dedicated people who earned their honored seats at my table through years of unwavering loyalty, mutual respect, and unconditional support. They did not care about my soaring net worth. They cared about my heart, my well-being, and my happiness. I picked up my heavy crystal glass of vintage red wine and gently tapped it against Ryan glass. The clear, sharp ring captured the immediate attention of the entire room. Conversations paused and smiling faces turned toward the head of the table. I raised my wine glass high, looking at my beautifully assembled, highly cherished chosen family. To the wonderful people who actually build each other up, I proposed, my voice ringing loudly with absolute certainty and boundless gratitude. To real family. The entire dining table erupted in loud, cheerful agreement, proudly raising their wine glasses in perfect unison. I smiled warmly, taking a very slow, deeply satisfying sip of my rich red wine. I had successfully survived the brutal emotional warfare, the severe financial manipulation, and the toxic gaslighting of my past. I had completely severed the poisonous roots of my biological family, allowing myself the necessary space to finally bloom. The ultimate revenge was not their public destruction. It was this exact, beautiful, perfect moment. The ultimate, sweetest revenge was living a brilliant, peaceful, and entirely unbothered life. The story of Claire's triumphant escape from her family's toxic grip offers a profound lesson on the true definition of family and the transformative power of boundaries. For years, Claire was treated as an invisible outsider by her own parents and sister, valued only for the financial resources she could covertly provide. Her biological family manipulated her, minimized her achievements, and ultimately attempted to banish her from a high society wedding she was paying for. However, the most empowering takeaway from her journey is that your inherent worth is never dictated by the people who are too self-absorbed to recognize it. When forced to confront their deception, Claire did not retaliate with screaming matches or vindictive cruelty. Instead, she responded with the cold, unyielding reality of firm boundaries. She withdrew her financial support, allowed the natural consequences of their deceit to unfold, and severed the toxic ties that had anchored her to their dysfunction. The narrative beautifully illustrates that walking away from abusive blood relatives is not an act of malice. It is the ultimate act of self-preservation. Furthermore, the story radically redefines the concept of belonging. It demonstrates that family is not necessarily the people you share DNA with, but rather the chosen family of friends, partners, and colleagues who support your dreams and respect your boundaries. Claire's ultimate revenge was not watching her parents and sister face ruin, but rather finding herself at the head of a holiday table filled with genuine love and laughter. She built a brilliant, unbothered life, proving that stepping out of the shadow of conditional love allows you to finally bloom. If you are currently pouring your energy into people who only diminish your light, have the courage to set firm boundaries today and start building the chosen family you truly deserve.